my pleasure to introduce one of today's speakers who will introduce you to today's other speaker. Tomas Lopez is a college graduate from Metro State University of Denver with a bachelor's degree in technical communications and a minor in Native American studies. Born and raised in Denver, Colorado, Tomas identifies as Chicano, paying homage to Mexican, Diné, Apache, and Hunka Lakota roots. He's grandson of Chief Leonard Crow Dog and the son of water woman Sharon Lopez and Sunda Chief Tomas Lopez Sr. He spent months working with the International Indigenous Youth Council on the ground at Standing Rock to defeat the Dakota Access Pipeline. He's continuing his activist work, being a voice for those who have been silenced. Please join me in welcoming today's speakers.
Give me one moment, please. Good morning. Hihani washde. Buenos dias. Oh, I guess it's afternoon now. I'm sorry. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Tomas Donatiu Dominguez Lopez. My mother is waterwoman Sharon Dominguez, and my father is Sundance Chief Tomas Lopez Sr. Like she said, I identify as Chicano. I am Apache, Otomi, Diné, and Hunka Lakota. I am very proud of both my southern and northern indigenous roots. 1 year ago, this week, I began my Standing Rock journey. And things got really crazy. And I'm so sorry, before I get into my actual story, I want to introduce somebody else who was also with us in Standing Rock and spent a lot more time in Standing Rock than I ever did. I want to introduce Wajinguda Eli Hornick, and I'm going to let him go ahead and tell you his story. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wajinguda Eli Hornick. I'm a descendant of the Ponca Nation. I'm also a descendant of Carter Camp, Casey Camp. My father is Mikasi, and my father was the one that actually took me and our family, to Standing Rock a month ago last year, maybe a little over a month ago last year. So I was there to watch things develop. I was there for the very first direct action, and I was there up until after Christmas. I was there for a while, and I seen a lot of beauty. I seen a lot of brutalization. And well, I want to talk about the first month. We was there, kind of like how everything started. And it started with prayer. Every single morning, my dad would go around, he would sing on a hand drum and wake everybody up with prayer songs. And we would get together, and before we ate breakfast, the whole camp would get together. Before we ate breakfast, we prayed. We prayed about what was going on, prayed to keep people safe, prayed for the police officers, prayed for our water. And that's what things started with. That's what I like to remember, is how things started in the very beginning. Even at the start of the day, how we started our day, it was with prayer. And I'm sorry. I'm really nervous. but what really inspired me as a youth was seeing other youth there, seeing other people. I'm 18. I turned 18 last year, and I seen lots of children there that were younger than me, that seemed more passionate, seemed like they had a bigger fire underneath them, and like that made me want to do something. That really made me like, what am I doing? Like, why is this kid more concerned than I am? You know what I mean? And it's just I had to change my perspective and change my mindset about a lot of things, because I was so used to living in the society that we do today, like living in our cities, going to school. And I'm sorry, I keep getting off topic. You guys are the first people I've ever spoken in front of. Yeah. Well, what really inspired me was our youth. You know, that's what made me join the IRYC, because at first I wasn't about it. I had my responsibilities that I handle. I had my things I had to take care of. And I just realized, like, the world doesn't change with our grandparents. The world doesn't change with our parents. It changes with us. It has to change with us. Like, we change ourselves, and then we raise our children, and then they choose to change themselves. And it's like, I don't know, I'm sorry. I'm like, I have to recollect myself. I feel like, I don't know. But what it was our youth coming together, and not only like our youth, but just about every indigenous person. And in a way, we all are indigenous. We're all indigenous to somewhere. We all have our own heritage, our own culture, a place where our genetics came from, a place like where our blood comes from, a home. And it's like we became connected. It didn't matter who you were, how you were. We was connected, and we was fighting for our future, our children, our water. And that, like, something I was really proud to be a part of, and something I had to be a part of, something I couldn't miss out on. You know what I mean? Like, because whenever I first got there, I was like, I wasn't like as outraged. I was still learning a lot. I was still learning a lot about what was going on and like the effects. And I didn't know the Missouri River was the largest in North America. Like, I was learning a lot. And the more I learned, the angrier I got. Like, the more concerned I got. And that, I mean, that's why we're here today. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm gonna let my brother speak. He's a lot better at this than I am. Thank you guys for listening to me.
Oh, I thought this was like a boost for me. Thank you all for listening to my little brother. One really big part of the International Indigenous Youth Council is giving youth the platform and all of the tools that they need to succeed in life. One really big reason why the International Indigenous Youth Council made it to the point that we are at now is because we didn't just ask for our voice, we demanded our voice. We knew that we really had never been heard, not only in indigenous culture, but also in American culture, in Western culture as well. So it's really important to me that even when the younger kids, they don't really know what to say, they may not be the most seasoned speakers, it's still really important that you listen to them. And it's still really important that you understand that they have a voice, and that their voice is important, and their voice actually might teach you something, and that you can learn even the most important lessons, even from a baby. So thank you all for listening to him and hearing what he had to say. And thank you for saying that, Eli. So a year ago, around this time, I began my journey to Standing Rock, as I told many of you. When I first got to camp, this was in the early stages when the first call for Indigenous peoples went out. I told my father, who's a Sundance chief, that I felt that as an Indigenous man, as the son of a very, very prominent chief, that we had an obligation to be there. And not only that, but I really just, I had just graduated from college. I couldn't find a job. I really didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was poor, no more student loans. I actually had to pay them. So it was like all these reasons were just like, well, nothing's stopping you, so you should just go. My cousins were up there. They were all telling me to get down there. So I go. I have no idea what to expect. And when I get there, it was unlike anything that I can even begin to describe. And growing up in a traditional household, to say that you're experiencing something so traditional that you can't even describe it is pretty intense. Like he said, we would wake up early every morning to the sound of traditional songs from different tribes from all around the world. Not just Northern Indigenous people, African Indigenous people, Southern Indigenous people, people from around the world sharing the little bit of culture that we have left, what we kept, what survived, what stayed with us. And it was the most life-changing experience I could ever have. The amount of love, the amount of knowledge that I received in just the 2 weeks that I was there at first was beautiful. It reminded me of the Indigenous strong man that I am. So the IYC wasn't present in Standing Rock in the beginning stages. Really, it started with a bunch of us youth coming together, and we were pretty pissed that we didn't have a voice, that people really didn't listen to the youth, and we had so many ideas. We had so many great ideas that we felt could be implemented to help us move forward. We had so many awesome things to offer, but we didn't have a spot at the table to offer it. So we did what we know, and we took tobacco to somebody and we demanded that spot, like I said. They began to see, not only did we ask for that spot, but we would show up at every single action. We were there. We were on the front lines, being maced, being brutalized, being attacked by dogs, being arrested. And every time that they saw us, we were always focused. It was very rare that you saw the youth acting out to the point where they were arguing with police officers or cussing at them or wanting to fight. It was the youth that were actually reminding our elders, this is why we're here. We're here in prayer. We're here in peace. We're not here to fight with police. This is not our battle right now. We're here to protect the water. So Chief Orville Looking Horse honored the International Indigenous Youth Council with a chanupa, which gave us our rightful spot at the table to make decisions in Standing Rock. So as time went by, the camp began to change. And as you kind of watch some of these videos, you'll see some earlier stages of camp when there weren't many people there. And then as time goes by, you begin to see the militarization of the police. And that's pictures like this. I don't know if this image has changed. So with the militarization of the police, you begin to see a lot of trauma come forward from indigenous people, people of color in general. As many of you may or may not know what's going on in the world, the relationship with police forces and people of color is not exactly what I would call peachy. And it brought forward that post-traumatic stress from all of us, the trauma that we've carried for generations, that has been passed down from generations, of being raped, being brutalized, being murdered, being ethnically cleansed, being beaten by white people in uniform. So when you begin to see that, you begin to also see the camp began to become a little bit more intense, a little bit scarier. And that's when I like to go to October 27th, which was the raid of North Camp, which is the day when a lot of people really began to notice what was going on in Standing Rock. This is when you begin to see a lot of us were there. We were trying to protect and defend the last spot that gave us direct access to the drill pad of where the Dakota Access Pipeline was going to drill under the Missouri River. So we all met there, and we were praying, and we all knew that within the next day or two that the police were going to come in and that they were going to attempt to raid the camp. Things went completely south for us. That was the day when we really truly experienced the cold steel hand of this government. And this is when we really began to understand who they were protecting and whose side that they were on. This is when you begin to see us being treated like property. We were arrested, we were maced, we were beaten. Our feathers, our traditional sacred objects were broken. They were taken away from us. People who were in Sweat Lodge, Inipi, Stone People's Lodge, were ripped out of it in the middle of it and handcuffed in zip ties that were so tight that their fingers and hands went numb. They left permanent scars on their hands for hours to sit there in the cold in soaking wet clothing, if any clothing. And they were arrested, they were put in dog kennels, and they were given numbers that were written with Sharpie on their arms. And if you look at some of the pictures that are up here, you'll see those pictures of some of these people's arms. Could you just, if it freezes on an image, could you press the space bar so that it goes to the next one? The last time that I know that this happened, just press mute. The last time that I know that this happened was during the Jewish Holocaust. And I say the Jewish Holocaust because there have been many Holocausts, yet that seems to be the only one that is ever really spoken about. The last time that people were given numbers like that on their arms was during the Jewish Holocaust. There was major uproar and there was major outrage, yet here it was being done to people in 2017, indigenous people of color, and it was completely legal, completely okay. After that, things really began to change. That's when I realized I was there for the long haul. I wasn't going anywhere, and that Standing Rock was my permanent resident. That's when you also begin to see the coming of thousands of people. Every week, the camp would completely change because weekend water protectors, we'd call them. They'd come, and then the camp itself would completely change. Then winter began to come. And as winter came, we began to realize that not only were we going to be facing brutalization from police and militarized police, but we were also going to be facing Mother Nature herself. The very water that we were protecting, we were going to have to be up against. And it showed itself in full force. The cold at the end of the day is one of the reasons why Standing Rock the physical Standing Rock camp came to an end. We simply weren't prepared for the winter that was coming, and it caused a lot of issues. Specifically on one night when at Backwater Bridge, when an action happened and they began spraying us with the very water that we were protecting. People with frozen icicles to their nose that were bloody, people with major head wounds, people with eyes missing, people with limbs missing. One of the most horrific experiences that I'll ever know in my life was walking into a medics camp and literally seeing war in American soil, knowing what a bleeder looks like, knowing what a major closed head injury looks like. Seeing kids cry, seeing kids with hypothermia is one of the most disturbing things that I have ever seen in my entire life. And the cold really played a huge role in why the physical camp had to come down. People often think that because the physical Standing Rock camp was disbanded, that Standing Rock is now over. What people fail to realize is that Standing Rock is still alive. Standing Rock is still stronger than it's ever been before. The fire that we lit at Standing Rock, all the embers that were there, that went into the air when we put out that fire, they moved. They moved and they created fires everywhere. Now there are protests and peaceful prayer camps all over the world. People standing up for their indigenous homes. People standing up for their indigenous rights. People saying, I am no longer going to be at the mercy of this corporation. Standing Rock is more alive than it's ever been, and it is not dying anytime soon. We learned a lot at Standing Rock. Not only as indigenous Native American people, but as people. We realized that it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter where you live. If your water source is poisoned, cancer will take you regardless. It doesn't ask you how much money you made. It doesn't ask you any of that. It simply comes in and it kills you, and it kills your children. And we were made very well aware of that while we were there. Everybody, the entire world. We learned that the indigenous people of Turtle Island are the keepers of Turtle Island, and that we will defend it to the end. We understood. Now I can go, before a year ago, if I were to go anywhere and say Miniwichoni, people had no idea what that meant. Now I can go to the United Kingdom and I can say Miniwichoni, and the entire room knows exactly what I'm talking about. We learned and we remembered who we were. We remembered where we came from. And we realized that all the answers, all the lessons, everything was right here in our blood. It was right here in our hearts. It never went anywhere. And we remembered that. We also learned the importance of giving a platform to your youth. to listening to your children, asking them what's wrong, what they did that day, opening a line of communication between you and a younger generation, not because you just want to talk to them, but because you want to teach them, because you know that when you're gone, they're still going to be here. We learned that. We remembered that. We understood that. We also learned the importance of knowing exactly what it is that you're getting into before you go. We learned the importance of being prepared. We learned the importance of being silent. We also learned that by simply existing, we are resisting a government and a system that was built on the genocide, the rape, the ethnic cleansing, the murder, and the beat of indigenous Native American people and Black people. And this is something that can't be denied, but yet is denied almost every single day. We understand now our existence is our resistance. Aho mitaki oyase. We're all related. That is my resistance. You didn't take my language. You didn't take my heritage. You didn't take my culture, and you never will. I'm still here. We are still here, and we are stronger than we've ever been. We're stronger because of the love that we have. We're stronger because of the prayers that we have. We're stronger because we are coming back to the fireplace that we've wandered away from. There is a prophecy about the seventh generation. And this prophecy is not only in Lakota traditions, this prophecy is global. This is a prophecy that comes from almost every single indigenous culture in the world. And they all talk about the seventh generation and how the seventh generation is going to rise higher, taller, and faster than any generation before it. That it would actually come together and it would admit to the mistakes and the things that we've done. We would take accountability for the things that we've done to ourselves, to the world, to the earth, to the animals, to the air, to the fire, to the water. They would admit to it. And then they would fix it. They'd put all of the bull crap that we've put in front of us down, and they're going to move forward. They'd stop the black snake from killing the world. Well, we're living in the seventh generation right now. This is the seventh generation. The time is now. We have no more time to hide. We have no more time to sit by and idle. There are no more shadows for us. It's here. It's time for us as people to come together and admit to what we've done. Take accountability for what we've done. We tell that to our youth all the time. Take accountability, but yet here we are denying here we are denying climate change. It's time to stand up and fight back. It's time to give the youth everything that they need to know that they can do it, that not only can they do it, but they will do it. It's up to you and us as the sixth and fifth generations to stand behind the seventh generation. We have to stand behind them. They have to know that they're loved. They have to know that we have their backs. They have to know that they have strong rocks behind them no matter what, because when you give them that, the possibilities are endless. I've seen it. I've seen kids verge of suicide, severe addiction to drugs, alcohol, sexual abuse. I've seen kids come to us with nothing, broken. And by simply giving them something to care about, simply giving them something to fight for, simply telling them you are seen, you are loved, you are acknowledged, and you matter. That one sentence and you change someone's entire life. I've seen it. They go from being what people call deviant, not good enough, to all of a sudden they're at the front lines. They're standing there and they're ready to get arrested for their people. They're ready to put their life down for the next 7 generations. But if you don't give that to them, and you don't allow them to grow, and you don't tell them what they need to hear, it'll never happen. It's like putting a plant in a dark room and expecting it to grow. I have points here, excuse me. There are many movements that are growing right now in the world. I wanted to put this sign, my Black Lives Matter sign, up here because I really believe, and I know that if it weren't for my black brothers and sisters, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I stand by my black brothers and sisters. I stand by my LGBTQ plus community. I stand by my Two-Spirit brothers and sisters. I stand by all of my sisters who simply want to be treated equally. I stand for the trans community. And what I've really learned over the past year is that we aren't many movements. We are one movement. We have to come together, all of us, because we're not going to do this alone. We don't have the capacity to do this alone. And the sooner that we start admitting that Black lives matter, that water is life, that women deserve rights, that trans people matter, that children have voices, that climate change is real, once we start admitting these things and coming together and saying it, saying out loud, Black people are treated worse in this country. By saying out loud, I am white, and by being born a white man, I have privilege. We have to say those things. We have to have these uncomfortable conversations that nobody wants to have. No, it is not my place as an Indigenous man to explain to white people your privilege. No, it is not my place to explain to men why they live in a society where they're treated better than women. It is not a woman's job to say that to you. We're at a point in time where if we don't get it together, we don't come together, we don't start having these conversations, we don't start admitting to the things that are going on, we're not going to change. I'm very honored and happy to be here today, especially after hearing about the story of this university's mascot. I walked down your campus today proud of myself with my feathers in my hair as an Indigenous man, with all thousands of my ancestors right behind me. And people will always look. People will always say something. People are always going to have something to say. And you know what? I don't care. And I'm going to have these conversations, and that's what the International Indigenous Youth Council reminded me that I can have the capacity to do, is to go out there and make sure that these fires stay alive. And that's what we're doing. Since camp, the International Indigenous Youth Council has began to apply for a 501c3 status. We are a fiscal sponsor under a group called Teocalli Sacred Heart of the Mountain, Native American Church in Denver, Colorado. And we travel from community to community telling our stories, telling stories like this. We talk to the youth, we talk to them about their lives, what they see in their communities that they feel needs to be changed. You really want to know what's going on in a family? You really want to know what's going on in your community? Ask your kids. They see it all, and they don't lie. So we've been going everywhere, not only defending land rights and water rights, but also realizing that we're defending humanity. I stand by my Black Lives Matter brothers and sisters. I stand next to the women in my life. I stand next to the LGBTQ plus community. The International Indigenous Youth Council has vowed to show up, to always be there. The International Indigenous Youth Council has vowed to be there for Indigenous youth of any culture, of any color, of any language. We've vowed to be there and make sure that these youth have every single tool that they need to change the world around them. In the next few years, you will begin to see some of the most powerful youth leaders this world has ever seen rise. I know that. I see it. I've met them. I've lived with them. Thank you all so much for allowing the International Indigenous Youth Council to be here today. It is a great honor for all of us. And now I think we're going to open it up to questions for anybody that might have anything to say. Yeah, you just
If folks have questions, feel free to just raise your hand, and if you don't mind, I'll have your call on, folks. I'll put the power in your hands. I think I have a second mic. I'm going to find it. It might be in my office, and I'll give it to you.
And if you want to answer anything, you can too. Questions? Anyone? Yes.
I wonder if you could, you talked about movements all over the world. I wonder if you could say anything about the movement in Canada, Idle No More, and Chiefs Fence.
So I am not going to speak too much because I'm not an expert on it, but what I can tell you is that we recently went up to the Six Nations Reserve in Canada with the Haudenosaunee and Mohawk people. And what I can tell you is that the Haudenosaunee and Six Nations people have been fighting pipelines and environmental issues forever. And they're not backing down. They don't back down. And they are very much in control of their reserve and what they do up there. So things are a little bit different in Canada than what happened at Standing Rock. If you go to Canada with the tribes up there, they have a very specific way that things are done. They have a very specific protocol that has been established, and that is the way things are. Whereas at Standing Rock, we kind of had to create a bit of a structure because it was so diverse. It wasn't just one group of people or one tribe. You know, it was many tribes. So we really had to kind of create a new structure. So that's what I can say. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah, I'm not an expert on the Idle No More, so I can't speak too much on it. Yeah, of course. Anyone else? No questions? Yeah, sure. Do you want to speak about that or no? Okay. So when you first got there, we were dealing with DAPL private security. There were like 3 or 4 of them, maybe 6 at the most, and they really were honestly just like guys that were employed. They were like, "Hey man, we're just here doing our job. Like, we don't want to start anything with you." And it was really calm and really chill and relaxed. Like, I think there's even one video of Chase Iron Eyes giving them water, and they're like giving them water, and the guys are like, "Thanks." Like, it's really cool. So that's like the first level. Then they upped it up, and they mercenaries volunteered. And once you start to see the presence of the mercenaries, that's when stuff begins to hit the fan. That's when you begin to see the vicious dogs that they bring there. That's when you start to see people with guns. You start to see actually the security agitating us in order to get a rise out of us so that they had reason to call the police. So after the mercenaries, it gets bumped up another level. And then you start to see Morton County Sheriff show up. So now you have private security, you have mercenaries, and you have Morton County Sheriff. Marion County Sheriff's Department, at first, they were kind of like, oh, it'll blow over. These natives are going to be gone. You know, whatever. They probably didn't think much about it. But then as soon as months started to go by, and as soon as we blocked the road at the North Camp, that's when they started to realize that we were serious, and we weren't going anywhere. And it wasn't just North Dakota, Dakota people. It was now tribes from all over the world. So then they upped it up again, and they called in the National Guard. And at first, the National Guard would just kind of stay behind everybody, like stay behind the mercenaries, the security, and Morton County, and just kind of let them do their thing. Then after the raid of North Camp, that's when everyone got militarized, and everyone then had the full head-to-toe black suit, mace shooters, the things that launches the rubber bullets. They actually have this giant, it looks like a fire extinguisher, but it's actually filled with mace. And they just walk by people and they spray them. They pulled out an LRAD. I don't know if anybody knows what an LRAD is, but it's actually a machine that they use high-pitched frequency to, and they aim it at you, and it can make a person sick. It can make your eyes bleed. It can burst your eardrums. It can cause severe internal damage. And after the raid of North Camp, which is where they wrote on everybody's arms and put them into dog kennels, after that raid that's when it was officially militarized. From then on out, we were surveilled 24/7. There were crop dusters and other planes and helicopters that would fly maybe 400 feet above us constantly, 24/7. At night, in the day, it didn't matter when there was a very specific no-fly restriction, but I'm assuming that was just for us. We also noticed that a lot of us began to have very similar symptoms when it came to like being sick, but they weren't really related to actually being sick. It was like all of the symptoms of being sick without a fever, which doesn't make sense because when you're sick, you get a fever. And so then we started to realize that at night, we had these, those LED flashlights that are like shine really far, and it's like, whoa. We would shine our flashlights, and you could actually see in the air what looked like glitter, thin glitter, just like floating in the air. And, you're in the middle of North Dakota where it's like there isn't pollution. There's pollution out there. Like, it's like this is one of the cleanest places you could be. So to see that in the air was alarming to people. Come to find out that they were actually using chemical warfare against us. They were making us sick. And so that's just on top of that, we had a lot of infiltrators in camp, which made it very difficult and very hard to sometimes trust people, especially people you didn't know. And eventually their plan was to make this peaceful, prayerful camp so warlike that we would eventually turn on each other. It didn't get to that point, luckily, but we did feel the stress of it feeling like we were at war, like we could not return home. There were many times where I would lay there and I would really believe that if they raided us, that they would kill us and that they would cover it up and nobody would know what happened to us. I really, really believed that. Like and I didn't believe it because I really have seen them do that. I believed it because I know that they've done it to us before. And so that fear, it worked. That fear worked on us. And that's one thing that we learned in camp is like that fear is there and they'll use it to control you.
I don't know if you know any of the details or whether there's an example, but the legal cases that have come out of it,
Mm-hmm.
if you have any on that, and if you could name the name of the one mercenary group there's a lawsuit against them because they were called in without
Yes.
without standing in Dakotas.
Yes.
And then, maybe as a throwaway, you hosted some indigenous people visiting from around the country, the world. I mean, so I was wondering if
Yeah. So, majority of the cases have been dismissed at this point. Everyone in the youth council, for the most part, has been dismissed. We won't talk about my case. Sorry, I got a bit of it to kind of collect my thoughts. So the one case that hasn't been dismissed and right now should be really at the forefront of this conversation that we're starting to have, is Red Fawn. Red Fawn is a woman from my community back in Denver. She went out there. She was on the front lines every day, and she was arrested on the day of North Camp. They said that she had a gun and that she fired it at the police. The video that they have, unfortunately, doesn't really depict that. It really just depicts about 8 6-foot, 200-pound white men jumping on a 5'5" woman, and then all of a sudden there's just a gun. You know, it's like gets pulled out. It just doesn't really add up. So she has been not charged, but they're still holding her, and they refuse to let her go in Morton County. They actually released her a few weeks ago. Judge said she was good, and another judge stepped in and overruled it, and they arrested her within like 20 minutes of her being released. So she's still in there. Her name is Red Fawn. I really highly suggest that everybody, you go and you read about Red Fawn, because she is right now, once Leonard Peltier's gone, she will be the Leonard Peltier of the United States. And those of you who don't know who Leonard Peltier is, he is what the U.S. calls their only prisoner of war. Only prisoner of war, right? And he, back in the American Indian movement during Wounded Knee Part 2, he was arrested for supposedly killing an FBI agent, which they actually never proved who killed him. So they used Leonard Peltier as a scapegoat. During that same uprising, his grandfather, Carter Camp, my grandfather, Leonard Crodog, my mother and father, they were all up there, and they were in the midst of Wounded Knee in 1976. About the actual private company that they hired, Tiger Swan, what was so funny is I remember we were in camp, and my friend was like, yeah, I think they hired this business called Tiger Swan, and like, she was like, look at their website, and she like read me their website and how they like pride themselves on pretty much being sneaky bastards. Like, excuse me, sorry. Like, they pretty much pride themselves on being like really terrible people and like doing really terrible things to people, and like they're like, yes, awesome, we mace people. Like, anyway, so she like reads this to me, and I read it, and I'm like, there's no way. Like, really, an anti-terrorist group, they're gonna send them here? Yeah, right, look at us, like, please. And come to find out that they did hire this company, which was an anti-terrorist group, and they were there illegally, and what the tactics that they were actually using against us were illegal as well. So we now have a lawsuit against this company, who probably never thought that they were gonna get caught, who probably were like, bunch of Indians, why does it matter? Like, we can do whatever we want. They're realizing that that's not going to happen. So I don't know too much about that case, but I do know that there's something going on with that, and that Tiger Swan, Tiger Swan is being investigated. Yeah. Yes.
So I know that almost everyone who was Annie Rock has changed. How did it change your life work, because you were there? What happens now?
So I don't know if you saw up here, but there's an image of me being arrested. When I moved there, and I stayed there for like my 3-month like long haul, I was super anti-arrestable. I didn't want to be arrested. I really didn't want to be on the front lines, to be completely honest. I was very hesitant, and I really I'm the second oldest person in the youth council. So when Erin, who was our camp mom, she just kept asking me, like, please come. Like, you're the only person that cleans. Like, you're the only person that gets up in the morning and chops wood besides Eli. And, like, she was like, can you please, like, just come and, like, spank these kids? Like, they're bad. And I was like, so I moved there, and, like, I'm just like, no, I'm camp uncle. Like, I'm just going to stay here and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't work that way. End up being on the front lines, my first action. And, like, anyway, so I was still anti-arrestable. Then I do this action in town after Backwater Bridge. I hadn't slept all night. I was pretty delirious, to be completely honest, because of everything that I had seen, but I couldn't sleep. So I go into town for this action. And I get there and I'm like, awesome. I'm like one of the only people of color here. That's great. We all know who the target in this is going to be. And sure, they come up to me, the people who are running the action come up to me and they ask me, you're the only Indigenous person here. And there were 2 other Indigenous people there, but they were like, no, we don't want to pray. And they're like, will you pray for us? Will you start this off, because this was an Indigenous-led movement, so we should probably have Indigenous people leading it. Anyway, so I go up there, and I pray, and we do this beautiful action in the middle of Mandan, and everything was lawful, everything was legal. It was pretty quiet compared to the night before, where we had all literally been, like, severely brutalized. So it was, in this weird way, like this very nice little breath of fresh air that, like, we came into town, we did something beautiful. We actually, I spoke to some of the police officers, and I kind of, like, asked them, like, why? You know, like, why did you do that last night? And, you know, I also brought up, you know, I get it, you're just doing your job, but the last people that said that they were just doing their jobs, you know, they were Nazis. And you know, when they were asked why they did what they did, they simply said, well, I was just following orders, you know? And I said that to them, and then made one of the guys cry, and whatever, he shook my hand. We finished our ceremony, and when we get to the end, they're like, will you finish the prayer? And so I begin to finish the prayer, and when I start finishing the prayer, these other people begin blocking off an intersection. Excuse me. Which was never my intention, and I wasn't the leader of this action anyway, so I was like, I don't think that's the best idea. It's like rush hour in the morning. These people are extremely angry, like very, very, very angry towards this movement, and I don't think that's like a safe idea. And at that point, we just had a girl lose her eye. We just had a girl lose her hand. We had people in the hospital. We had someone had a heart. We didn't need anybody else getting hurt. It just was unnecessary. It didn't need to happen. So I'm like trying to finish my prayer, and in the middle of my prayer, Officer Kirchmeyer, who was the chief of police for the Morton County Sheriff, comes up, gets out of his car, points at me, says, arrest him, goes through this group of white people who are blocking off the intersection, kicks me to the ground, grabs me to the side, and arrests me. And when he arrests me, he looks at me and says, if you resist, we have live ammunition, we will use it, and we will arrest everybody. So go ahead and resist. And in my head, I was furious, but I kind of asked myself, like, what did your parents teach you? My parents, even though my dad is a Vietnam vet, my dad never really taught me to fight. He taught me how to defend myself if I need to, but he didn't teach me, you know, you fight and you know, you're a scrapper and you beat people up. My dad didn't teach me that, and neither did my mom. But what they did teach me was how to pray. They taught me how to pray in my language. They taught me how to sing my songs. They taught me how to be the spiritual individual that I am. And in that moment, like, I just realized, like, after hundreds of years of oppression, after hundreds of years of you kicking me to the ground and telling me to not be who I am, after hundreds of years of you telling me not to pray, I refuse. It ends right now. I refuse to be a victim of white supremacy. I refuse. I refuse to be a victim of corporate greed. I refuse. And in that moment, a proverb comes in, and I tell this everywhere I go. They would always say, individually, we're just one rock, but together, we're a mountain. And no matter which way or how loud the wind howls, the mountain will never bow to it. So they could do what they want with my physical body in that moment, but they could never have my mind, my heart, my soul, my prayer. And I finished that prayer. I finished that prayer in zip ties on the ground, being humiliated in front of all of these people. I finished my prayer, and they arrested me. They booked me. And after that is when, in jail, sitting there and realizing that I'm in an 8-person cell, 7 of us are people of color, 6 of us are indigenous, 1 of us is black, I realized that moment, sitting there, that I wanted to dedicate my entire life to making sure that my people stay alive and that we continue to survive and we continue to exist. And when I say my people, I don't just mean my indigenous brown people. I mean my people, my black people, my white people, my Asian people, my LGBTQ plus people, my trans brothers and sisters. I met all of them. I dedicated my life in that cell to make sure that everywhere I went, I always advocated for people whose voices were taken away from them, because my voice was never taken away from me. I kept my voice. My parents made sure that I grew up with a strong voice that could move people, and I can't waste it. I can't waste this gift that I was given. I have to use it for my people. And from there, I swear I got arrested yesterday, and within the blink of an eye, I'm here. Within the blink of an eye, I was in the UK. I was in Canada. All of a sudden, I'm in New Mexico. I'm in California. I'm in New York. I'm everywhere, talking to all of these young people, trying to give a part of myself to them so that they can take it and run with it. And I really realize, I understand that in Standing Rock, I found that. I understood the power that we all have. It's not just me. We all have the ability to do this. We just have to awaken ourselves to actually find it. And so that's what I learned in Standing Rock. That's what I took away from Standing Rock, and that is who I am now. Water is life. Go ahead, Virginia.
Can you get, all right, cool. Music, music is music is a feeling. Music is a feeling. And the songs that we sang on the front lines while we were in front of police officers, there was children, there was women, there was being maced, and they stood there. They stood strong, and they sang these same songs, the same songs that have been being sung for hundreds of years. I got it back right here, bro. All right. And they were prayer songs. These people, they were standing there and they were praying. They were singing, they were praying, and that it was like every day we would sing the same songs. And people being there, you start to learn the songs. You start to learn what they mean. You start to learn the language of their people. And whenever you learn what they mean, like the words, there's a song that I took from Standing Rock, and I love it. The AIM song. The AIM song reminds me of my grandpa. That was a movement before ours, and it makes me think of him. And like, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at this. But music is inspiring, and I was inspired by a single song. And every single time I hear that song, I feel power. I feel pride in myself and where I come from and the blood that I have. And I feel proud of my grandfather. So there's this song, and I like, it reminds me of the movement. It makes me feel proud. It makes me feel proud I was there, like, that I was there every day and I could learn it without trying to. I could learn it by heart without, like, without having to ask somebody, hey, will you teach this to me? It's because everybody around me was singing it. Everybody around me, like, I don't know. Music kept us going. Music kept us strong. And that's what it was every single night. Like, that was the beauty of it. That was the love. Like, there was so many nights I remember, like, that I hope I never forget. Sitting around a fire and people banging on a five-gallon bucket, or hitting sticks together, and people throwing out bars, or singing beautiful songs, using their voices, or singing, like, songs from their cultures, like, different parts of the earth, different languages, and they would tell us what they mean, tell us where it came from, tell us how old the song was. And that, it was beautiful, because that's whenever it wasn't, like, whenever things weren't being hectic, whenever things weren't being aggressive or violent or what you've seen, they were beautiful. It was about love. It wasn't about aggression. It wasn't about standing up. Like, it was like, we're together. We're right here together. Like, we're eating breakfast together. We're having a conversation. We're, like, learning about each other's culture, sharing each other's culture, songs. Music was like, kind of like what the icebreaker, all of it. Like, every day I walked out singing a new song or whistling, or, like, at nighttime, the drums were going all night. Every single night you fell asleep to the drums. Every single night you fell asleep to them singing, people dancing. I remember one night we sat around, we made this fire because it was cold. It was like a week or two before it snowed. We made this bonfire like this big. It was like where people could dance around it and stay warm. And we was there for maybe 10 minutes. I was there with a really good friend of mine named Anton. He taught me a lot. He's who I like learned a lot of songs from. We was there for like 10 minutes and people started coming around. Well, after an hour, there was over 200 people there. After an hour, everybody was together, holding hands, dancing, round dancing, and the energy. I couldn't sleep. That's what was hard. Like, I couldn't sleep. There was so much energy. Like, it was so beautiful. It didn't matter if I got up every day at 6. It didn't matter if I worked all day. I couldn't sleep at night because there was so much energy. There was so much love in the air. So yeah, music did bring us together. Music kept us going.